race relations in this country. And so we stand here in solidarity with the Black Caucus. We will do everything we can in our power in terms of seeing if there's any policies or legislative action that we have to take to ensure that this doesn't happen. But just to let the family of the victim know that they're not alone. We stand with them, and us as Latinos in this state who have also suffered numerous amounts of hate crimes because of the color of our skin or because of what we look like, are here to say that enough is enough. Thank you.
I'm not sure whose BlackBerry that is. It's near a microphone. We had that discussion earlier. Please welcome my colleague also from the Los Angeles County South Bay area, the Honorable Warren Ferrantani.
Thank you very much, Senator Wright. I'm Assemblymember Warren Ferrantani. I'm also chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus. We have 11 members in the legislature. I think it's really important that we stand together around this issue. In this particular case, what we're talking about is a young man that happens to be African American, but we can all make our own list relative to victims of hate crimes, unfortunately. We stand together to make a very simple message be heard very loud and clear. I know there's much discussion and there's back and forth, there's tweeting, there's all kinds of comments being made in the press. This should not be done in the press. This should be done in a court of law. And in looking at this issue, having this 1 month pass without charges being brought against this individual for shooting an unarmed young man, people can talk about schoolyard fights, about who started it, what happened. This person killed another person that was unarmed, and he followed him down the street. All of the basic information is there. We call on that this person be charged, and that we look at this issue in a court of law rather than in the media or other places, because this is where this needs to be adjudicated. A crime has been committed, it should be dealt with in the law, and he should be charged, and that should take place. We in our caucus stand not with the African American caucus and the Latino caucus and our other caucuses, because we're ethnic caucuses. We stand with them as human beings, sisters and brothers in the human family. We're no longer going to stand for this kind of killing and hate crimes that's going on in this country. Thank you.
You had a question?
Yeah.
I'm going to take yours, and then I'm going to recognize the one later.
All right, so when we spoke yesterday, you told me you weren't gonna wear the hoodies on the Senate floor. You said you were gonna wait until the press conference. Why did you make the decision to wear it, and when did you make the decision?
No, we weren't going to wear it during the session. What we did was, again, to recognize the decorum in our House, we waited until the adjourned memory portion of the session, which was the appropriate time we felt to wear the hoodie in memory of Trayvon. We did not want to disrupt the Senate session, and there was no attempt to try to circumvent the rules of the House. And so what we did was we had an agreement with our Rules Committee that at the time that we were doing the presentation, that we would then don the hoodie in memory of Trayvon, so that we were able to have the memorial that we wanted for Trayvon and have the coexistence of the business of the House. Any other? Let me recognize from, I'm sorry, yes, sir.
Mr. Wright, at what point did you decide that there was enough evidence coming out of Florida to take this very public stand?
You know, I gotta tell you, the young people really drove this for me, and I can remember years ago when I included myself as the young people, but there's a word when you have grandkids that you don't get to call yourself that anymore. But as my own children and my grandchildren and children in my district began asking me, what do you do about this? And initially I thought, okay, well, Florida's going to work this out. And then as I spoke to my congressional colleagues, and I was listening to what they were doing, and I saw Jesse Jackson, who I used to work for, and Al Sharpton, and the NAACP, and I saw people moving into Florida, recognizing that I didn't have the opportunity to get to Florida to participate. It occurred to me that here in Sacramento, where I do work and I do have a leadership role, that I had an obligation to make sure to lift my voice. And let me say as well that when we spoke to the other caucuses of color, there was no reservation about whether or not they would participate. So whether or not it was the Asian Pacific Islander caucus, the Latino caucus, the Women's caucus, to a person, they all said, we'll join with you, the Legislative Black Caucus, in this effort.
But did you reach a comfort level with what evidence was available to step forward
Well,
with
I
this?
gotta tell you, the 911 call where the 911 operator was saying to Mr. Zimmerman, are you following him? Stop, don't do that. That was fairly compelling for me, because what was clear at that point was that Mr. Zimmerman had the presence to call the 911 operator, and there was no threat clear that you could see because he felt comfortable enough to call. You heard no voice in the background at that time. So what was clear at that point was that everything that took place subsequent to his 911 call, when he was asked not to follow Trayvon Martin, becomes his fault in my view, because he initiated the contact. So that even if there were, for example, a fight that ensued that he claims that he lost, he initiated the contact. That's not, even in my understanding and reading of the Florida Stand Your Ground statute, it doesn't mean that you can chase down the person. Stand your ground means if he'd have stood his ground, Trayvon Martin would have gone his way, and Mr. Zimmerman would still be there, and they'd both be alive today. But in his choice of how to pursue it caused the life of that young man, I believe, and that's what a court of law should find. Yes, sir.
Congressman Bobby Rush, as you know, was ejected from the House of Representatives chambers yesterday for wearing a hoodie during the session. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, since your display today sort of echoes that, but you've expressed that you approach it with a little bit more restraint and regard for the rules of the chamber.
I mean, I don't know all, I mean, I saw the CNN display that occurred with Congressman Rush, and I know him from Chicago. We did a couple of things, because again, I have a great deal of respect for the Senate to which I was elected. One of the things that we did was we actually conferred with our Rules Committee in advance. So we didn't show up in surprise, the leadership of our House, what we were doing. So we actually had a bipartisan discussion that we were gonna have a memorial for Trayvon Martin today. Again, I have a great deal of respect for the Senate. There was no attempt by any of us in the Senate or the Assembly to kind of sort of stage a demonstration. One of the reasons for that is I'm a member of the Senate. And so I feel that it's my obligation and it's my duty to use that forum in a manner to which it was intended to be used. I don't know that Mr. Rush was not granted that opportunity. I don't know what he attempted to do in order to gain the microphone. I dare say, though, that if it were a challenge that we had where we were denied what I believe would have been our rights under the rules of the Senate, we might have had a different kind of discussion. But again, I credit, Speaker Perez, I credit Speaker, Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg, I credit Assembly Member Conway and Senator Huff, because, and again, in a bipartisan fashion, we did what we believe was the best utilization of the House that we all served in and have a great deal of respect for. Let me introduce just for a second, because I know he got away, Assemblyman Aleo from Central Valley.
Very briefly, I just wanted to be here as a member of the Latino Legislative Caucus, expressing my solidarity. Just on the floor today, we celebrated Cesar Chavez Day, and the message there was that how different communities of color and different peoples of all walks of life have come together to address unjust laws and injustices in many parts of our country. And from the West Coast to the East Coast, we're trying to send a message that we need to address these issues. Often our youth are criminalized, youth of color are often criminalized, and certainly we're here to raise awareness about this issue, but also that his family and that people who are standing in solidarity all across the country will know that all of us have come together to address this as legislators from different backgrounds to support this cause, and hopefully there will be justice in the end for this young man and for his family as well.
Yes, sir.
Senator Wright, are you concerned at all, because obviously this is a racial issue, are you concerned at all that the nature of your news conference here today with the hoodies and the other props might fan the flames and create a problem in Florida that could lead to more, let's say, violence?
I would hope not. I mean, one of the things that, you know, again, I don't even want to mention his name, and I'm possibly going on a show later, but wearing a hoodie should not be an offense. This is an article of clothing. And, you know, just as we would not say that a woman who was wearing clothing of her choice deserves to be accosted or raped, I would hope that wearing a hoodie would not be something that would cause one to get assaulted or arrested or otherwise prosecuted. You know, the concern and why we were wearing the hoodie is that it became somehow when the reporter, the newscaster said that it was the fault of his parents for buying him the hoodie that caused him to be killed. Now, in many instances, you just said that's just ignorant and why would someone do that? But this was a responsible news person who said this over the airwaves. Now, he's since retracted it, but I think he shares a view that many people have, that those black guys wear hoodies and therefore they deserve what they got. I mean, God forbid if in this country, if we now say that what you wear gives you what you deserve. I mean, I know black guys who wear Brioni suits. What does that mean we get? I mean, at some point, there's gotta be some balance. And I know white guys who might wear hoodies. What happens to those guys? I mean, we should not judge people. I mean, we had, Dr. King once said that you should not be judged by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character. I hope we've not now reduced that, so we're now going to be judged by the kind of clothing that we wear. And God forbid, again, if we have that kind of country where what you wear dictates what you get. Now again, I'm a member of the Senate, and the Senate has a dress code. We respect the dress code because we honor the house that we're in and the people whom we represent. So recognizing that, we follow the rule of the place that we're a part of. That doesn't mean that if I'm away or I'm walking down the street, I don't necessarily wear a suit and tie if I'm going to a social event or a sporting event. You know, and what you wear becomes your option. But even with that, I still respect the house that I'm a part of.
Is the goal from nearly 3,000 miles away in this display that you're doing to put pressure on the Florida authorities to make an arrest, or is the ultimate goal here just to draw attention that things like this are still happening?
You know, I'm not sure what the Florida authorities do, and I'm sure by now they should be embarrassed, if nothing else. I look forward to the Attorney General of the United States assuming the investigation, given that there has been no arrest or prosecution at this point, that there's sufficient evidence where it might become a federal prosecution under the criminal statutes or possibly a civil rights violation under the federal statutes. I don't have, at this point, much confidence because I've not heard from the Florida authorities what they intend to do. I know the governor of Florida has appointed the lieutenant governor to oversee a commission to look into it, but I'm not sure that that has any investigatory power or that there's a grand jury impaneled or the other things that would bring justice. So for that, I'm looking for the Attorney General of the United States to take charge because, again, I mean, Trayvon Martin was a citizen of the United States who happened to reside in Florida. So the Florida state government had an obligation to do something, but it still remains the duty of the United States to uphold the rights of each one of its own citizens, even if the state of Florida will not do that.
So you're hoping displays like these will help encourage the federal government to move forward, or is this just a general, you know, Trayvon Martin is a symbol of what's happening in this country?
Well, fortunately, the federal government is moving forward, and I spoke with members of the Legislative Black Caucus who were very instrumental in moving the Justice Department to do that. When the President of the United States made his comment about Trayvon Martin, indicating that if he had a son, his son would look like Trayvon, I commented that if I put on this hood, I could be Trayvon. And so recognizing that reality, we do have to look at the world broader, and again, I hope that the federal government assumes the role of prosecutor and allows justice to go forward for that family.
Senator Wright, a lot of people hearing this today, what your words will be moved to do something. What do you hope this might motivate people in California to do?
Well, I mean, we don't have the same kind of law about stand your ground, thank God. But at the same time, what I hope we all do is recognize that California, much like Florida, is a culture or a state of many cultures. I mean, we have people who come here from China and Mexico and Jamaica and Africa and you name the country. I mean, in the LA Unified School District, there are over 50 languages spoken. So we clearly have a pluralistic society in California, and we want to recognize that. So what we hope people do is recognize that everybody is entitled to his space. Everybody's entitled to worship how they want. Everyone should be entitled to love who they want. I mean, in a broad scope, we should not stereotype people and castigate them simply because we make a determination that whether it's a hoodie or whether or not it's something else that's unique to another culture. I mean, there was a gentleman shot here in Sacramento because he was Sikh and he was wearing a turban. We should not allow that kind of racism or other kind of ism to affect how we live with each other in the United States or Sacramento or California. Thank you all so much.
To your question, though, it is a teachable moment. We think it is an opportunity to have a discussion, not just, legislative bodies, but homes, communities, organizations. And to be sensitive that it still is an issue that we have to focus attention on. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.